welcome party. It's nice to have you here.
Hi, folks who are just coming in. We're just waiting for sort of critical mass of folks to get in from the pre-registration. Just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Okay, guys, we've got a pretty critical mass. I'm going to get started today. I am Maura McCarthy. I'm the CEO of the Fairmount Park Conservancy, and I want to say thank you so much to everybody for joining me tonight in our follow-up to the January 26th community conversation about the FDR Park plan. There is so much passion for parks and open space in Philadelphia, and this is particularly true for FDR Park. And at the January meeting, that passion was on full display. Though over 400 people attended and hundreds of in-depth conversations were had about all aspects of the FDR Park plan that night, I want to start by acknowledging that there was also a great sense of frustration for many attendees who came and were unable to enter because of the limitations of the venue capacity. Furthermore, some of the folks who object to some aspects of the plan continued in that process to feel unheard, frustrated, and as though their opinions were not being taken into account. There is genuine grief felt at the transformations underway. And as a beloved trees and grass fairways become something new. Some longtime community members at FDR also expressed frustration and felt that their input into the original park plan and their needs are now being disregarded and written over by constituents who don't share their views, needs, or priorities. The Fairmount Park Conservancy's role in this process is to oversee the implementation of the FDR Park plan, while connecting diverse constituencies to the park land and to one another, even or perhaps especially when these constituencies don't agree with one another. Together with our partners at Philadelphia's Parks and Recreation, we've spent hundreds of hours over the last several years hearing from many diverse park users and park lovers. And the FDR plan that we're going to discuss more today is rooted in these diverse voices and balances these many needs and desires. Oops. I think by now, it's only been like 4 years of pandemic, I'd know how to operate this thing. You might recall that at the January meeting, those of you who attended, which I think is everybody in this meeting, we had 4 stations that covered different phases of the park plan that were either currently underway or in development and scheduled for completion in the next few years. And those phases were the gateway phase, the nature phase, the picnic and play phase, and the great lawn, porch, and market phase. At the stations that were set up around that room, you could see the detailed drawings of the changes to come in each phase of work. And you could talk to a facilitator, ask questions, and use some of the paper forms provided to write down your feedback and any additional questions you have about the site. We collected those feedback sheets, and from those sheets, obtained the questions that you're going to see in tonight's presentation. Let's see if I can do this. Aha, here we go. Our goal this evening is to share these questions and provide answers to the best of our abilities to all of you here tonight. so that it's clear how the FDR Park Plan makes the most of FDR's 350 acres, balancing disparate needs and including something for everyone. Throughout the meeting tonight, you're going to hear me refer to two key elements in the FDR Park Plan, the ecological core and the urban edge, when answering some of these questions. These are conceptual categories for how the parkland is treated within the plan. These two zones have different management systems and public uses, but they are not actually separable. We cannot continue to operate FDR Park as an urban park with over 4 million visits a year without both a highly functional ecological core and an urban edge that raises zones of activity above the encroaching tidal floodplain. The questions we received were grouped around the phases of the plan that are either currently underway or in development and scheduled for completion in the next few years. The gateway phase, the nature phase, the picnic and play phase, and the great lawn, porch, and market phase. The first of these phases slated for completion is going to be the gateway phase, which encompasses the Anna C. Verna Playground, the Welcome Center, and the Gateway Plaza. Some of the questions we received about the gateway phase include, what's the timeline for this phase? The Anna C. Verna Playground will be opening this summer in June 2023, and our first ever Welcome Center will be opening this fall in probably November 2023. The Gateway Plaza will break ground this year and is expected to open in spring 2024. Those three projects, launched in 3 consecutive years, will together mark the completion of the gateway phase by 2024. Can we explain the plan for safety and easy pedestrian access from public transportation? Currently, 80% of the users arrive by car at FDR Park. And we know that existing mobility infrastructure influences the choices that people make, getting into and from FDR Park. The very first project completed in the park plan was the installation of a bike lane on the Park Loop Road. The Gateway Plaza, which is slated for completion in 2024, is designed to reach out to pedestrians and cyclists with safe, inviting landscape. The plaza creates a safe, highly visible gateway from the NRG SEPTA station across the street. And the plaza also ties into the future Broad Street side path, which is being developed right now by Otis. The park plan also includes, for enhanced mobility, a paved 5K loop that will connect park amenities fully separated from vehicular traffic. How many public bathrooms will be at the Welcome Center? There will be 14 public bathrooms with running water. Very exciting news for all of Philadelphia. How will you decide what food vendors will be in the Welcome Center? We're going to be doing an extensive RFP process to identify vendors. And I'm asking everybody who is interested in this project, if you know somebody who might be interested, please encourage them to apply when that becomes available this fall. The RFP will be publicly posted. We hope that we're going to attract small Philadelphia-owned W and MBE businesses as vendors in the 3 vendor spaces in the Welcome Center. Will concessions accept EBT and provide a diverse array of food and drinks from different cultures and be priced at an affordable rate for people of low income? So our priorities in trying to find vendors for the space in the Welcome Center are to work with local business owners. And what we really want to do is create a fantastic amenity that all park users will enjoy while generating revenue that will sustain the ongoing maintenance and programming in the park, while also contributing to the health of the local hyperlocal economy. Because we have not yet identified these vendors, we haven't even released the RFPs, we can't say yet what modes of payment they might or might not be able to accept. The Fairmount Park Conservancy does look forward to working with local vendors and establishing the practices and the menus that will make them and the site successful. What we call the nature phase is actually one part of the 209-acre ecological core of FDR Park. And the nature phase encompasses the first 100 acres of high-quality environmental restoration that takes place in the park on the site of the old golf course, what's known today as the FDR Meadows. What community engagement has been done since announcing the plan? Engagement around the FDR project has been ongoing since 2018. In the last 4 years, we've hosted 8 public meetings and open houses, and over 150 separate hours of walks, meetings, presentations, and additional listening sessions just in 2022 alone. We've used that ongoing public feedback and the deeper ecological analysis to further shape the plan. And in 2022, we launched a revised plan. This revision was informed by both the listening sessions and the additional environmental data that becomes available as we progress on each stage of the plan. What changes to the original plan have been implemented in the last 2 years? Well, last summer, as I just mentioned, in 2022, we announced an update to the plan that expands the natural areas of the park to 209 acres, or 60% of the park land. The previous plan had the natural areas of 50% of the park land. This was able to be done while keeping the much needed athletic sites requested by the community. And the locations of the athletic amenities were shifted to better retain some newly identified high quality wetlands and accommodate opportunities for newly identified emergent wetlands. Is there a happy medium that expands sports facilities while retaining a large portion of the wild space? By moving the critical infrastructure that supports park users and restoring over 200 acres of habitat to a high quality, this plan is that happy medium. It may feel in the near term that the wild spaces are being removed, but in fact, the work being done in the nature phase restores critical missing wild habitat zone to the landscape. This can be hard to see if you're just looking at the park in an aerial view from slides. And that's one of the reasons why I hope that folks who are interested in diving down deep into the causes and effects of the restoration work will be able to join me at one of the many upcoming FDR Park walks and talks so that we can look at the landscape and the coming changes together in person. Could the meadows be saved and preserved as they are? So many of the stories we've heard from stakeholders have been about the deep connection that people feel with this space and how much it's meant for them and their families as a safe space in a chaotic world. However, the meadows cannot be saved and preserved as they are right now due to the impacts of climate change and the groundwater issues that interfere with active uses of the park and deteriorate the landscape. If we leave this landscape untouched, it will not remain in its current state for much longer due to the frequency of flooding and the rising groundwater within the park boundary. The current work underway on the former golf course will restore 100 acres of that site back to a high-quality, sustainable natural habitat and will include a mix of forest, meadows, trails, creeks, but most importantly, wetland. We understand that that change, especially in a public park, is incredibly hard to see. And we're committed to making a more resilient and equitable future for FDR Park a reality. Replacing the old golf course with a wetland is a critical part of that plan. A wetland already exists at FDR. Why do we need a new man-made wetland? A wetland is actually a distinct ecosystem that is flooded or saturated by water, either permanently for years or decades, seasonally for weeks or months, or based on the tides. This flooding results in an oxygen-free process in the soil and gives rise to specific plant communities and animal species. Functioning wetlands are capable of sequestering between 81 and 216 metric tons of carbon per acre. Currently, though, much of FDR Park is inundated by groundwater and is wet, but it is not a wetland habitat. FDR Park does currently have some small fragmented wetlands that are disconnected from one another. They provide relatively minimal ecological and habitat value in their current state. The wetland currently being constructed by the Philadelphia International Airport takes a hill of construction debris and creates a 30-acre locally rare tidal wetland. The remaining 70 acres of the first nature phase create additional emergent wetlands, preserve and expand existing forested wetland fragments, and restore the Shedbrook Creek. The end result is over 100 acres of connective wetland habitat that will be much healthier in the long term for the sustainability of the environment and the plants and animals and people that depend on it. A question that people ask a lot is this one: can't nature perfectly correct itself? Surely, the logic is that surely the rising groundwater will reclaim the space and eventually it will become a true wetland. But that's not actually the case. People have changed the climate. Every time we enter the park, we introduce new factors, invasive species. The park is regularly flooded with stormwater runoff. Our foot traffic, our dog poop, and the rubbish we leave behind all continue to degrade the environment. Because of people, unmanaged natural lands in an urban setting continue to degrade, becoming less diverse ecologically and less healthy over time. This wetland project jumpstarts the natural reclamation of these lands as tidal flats, separating out human use for a brief period of time, allowing it to become established, all while ensuring that the over 4 million visits a year to this park are able to continue unabated. This is also a common question. Shouldn't we maximize native plant life, biodiversity, and prioritize wildlife? The FDR Park plan does maximize native plant life and biodiversity, particularly within the 200 acres of the ecological core. But it also prioritizes the lives of the people who live in our city. And I think a really important thing to recognize with this plan is that FDR Park is not, in fact, a wildlife refuge. It is a city park for the people who live here, first and foremost. And the plan was designed with people's needs in mind first. What is the maintenance plan for the new ecological areas and fields? The written FDR Park plan outlines the basic maintenance needs of the park post-implementation, and those needs are going to be met by a mix of city PPR staff members, FPC staff members, contractors, and volunteers, depending on if it's regular or extraordinary maintenance. Each phase and project within this plan has its own maintenance and management plan, so I couldn't easily synopsize all of them for you here tonight. But for more specific information about a particular phase or project within FDR, I once again invite people to come and join me on a walk and talk, because we can have a detailed look at and discussion about the space and its long-term maintenance needs a lot more easily in situ in the field. Will there be any old growth trees kept in FDR Park? It's important to note that old growth trees are defined as specimens over 150 years old. And since most of FDR Park was built less than 100 years ago, there are very few old growth trees in FDR Park. The eastern half of the park is home to the oldest trees, dating back to the sesquicentennial exhibition in 1926. PPR and FPC are focused on the care and maintenance of these species, even as climate changes around them. And we hope to be able to retain as many of these older growth trees as possible, based on the tree health and the shifting topography of our rising tidal floodplain. Do we have a current species list of plants and trees? Again, within each phase of planning and development in the park, a tree survey is undertaken, which documents the size, health, and species of the tree. Currently, FPC has evaluated the species in and around the Welcome Center and the Pattison Playground. And as we undertake and finalize design work for each new element, those locations will also be evaluated. This is also a common question that I've gotten, not just in the meeting, but also in a lot of walk-in talks. Is the soil in FDR Park contaminated? So during the planning phase, the airport's engineering team conducted over 100 soil tests on the footprint of the proposed 33-acre wetland. Throughout construction, the airport team has continued to test the soil, and their contractors are required to remove any soil or other material from the park that doesn't meet standards for clean fill. Only clean fill will remain in this park. Can we see the scientific studies that the master plan is based on? This is a very popular question also. The park plan included teams of biologists, ecologists, and hydrologists, as well as landscape architects on the planning team. The result of their work and study was integrated and incorporated into the FDR Park plan document itself, in the mapping, graphics, and tables that you can see articulated in the plan document. And that plan document remains available on the FPC website. How will the existing animals and natural areas be protected? In each phase of the project development, ecologists and biologists survey the construction site to understand what important wildlife is present and to create a plan for protecting critical species. For example, hundreds of feet of turtle fencing were installed to keep turtles from nesting in construction sites prior to the airport project commencement. Those protections are coordinated with the seasons of animal behavior. Also, FDR Park's construction and environmental restoration work is being phased. This allows animals to move through the site and find relief from areas under pressure. We see this in other parks when meadows are mown, when forests see replanting or construction takes place. Animals will travel from one area where activity is happening to a nearby area where there is no activity. Oh, did I go forward there? Here. How will planting new trees help with tree cover and heat management in the present while we wait for new trees to grow? I think it's important to also recognize that while trees are a critical part of urban infrastructure and we desperately need them to mitigate urban heat island effects, wetlands and open water also provide respite from urban heat islands. Because most of FDR Park is not paved, the heat island benefits from individual trees within the footprint of the park is relatively small. With a changing climate, invasive pests, and rising groundwater, we have to start planting appropriate specimens today for the replacement canopy that we hope to have in the future. This one is very specific. I got trapped in FDR Park meadows at dusk because there was no signage direction around the construction sites, endangering people. There is no signage giving direction, only a no trespassing sign at the construction, but it blocks the trail access. So I would just want to say that the purpose of signs on a site near construction locations are to keep people safe. And we always recommend following the directions of the signage for your safety. Looking into the future of the plan, the FDR plan does propose nearly 10 miles of new trails, including the paved Franklin 5K loop and 5 miles of soft surface or natural trails. And those trails will be part of a plan that will be accessible for all and include signage and lighting. So the planned trails will certainly not have that issue. In the interim, we would encourage folks to follow the instructions on construction signing. The nature phase and the picnic and play phase together elicited by far the most comments and questions. Both phases take place on the old golf course land that is known now as the Meadows. And as a result, both phases are impacting a beloved and well-used open space. This is a very common question as well. Why are athletic fields coming to FDR Park? Can't you use empty lots or parking lots around the city instead? And I think it's also good to remember for this question that FDR Park is not primarily a wildlife refuge. It's a city park for the people who live here first and foremost. Public spaces and parks are places where people can and should encounter nature as well as their fellow community members that they would perhaps otherwise not meet. Retaining that social interaction is an important part of the FDR Park plan. Furthermore, it's important to know that empty lots and parking lots are often contaminated post-industrial spaces and subject to the heat island effect that we talked about above due to their dense paving, and therefore they're really inappropriate places for play. FDR doesn't need more sports fields. Can't the city use existing fields that are locked and unmaintained? This is another popular question that I often get from the public. The Fairmount Park Conservancy knows that playing fields are essential for youth in our city, providing mental and physical health benefits. The need for more sports fields in South Philadelphia is critical to serve the growing number of local youth sports leagues, as youth and anti-violence advocates have been expressing. Currently, there is a lack of high quality or even playable by regulation standards athletic fields across the city. And that's true in South Philadelphia particularly. It's not uncommon to hear of youth sports teams forfeiting games or having to raise money to cross city lines and use fields in the suburb due to a lack of access here in the city. The FDR Park plan will deliver high quality field capacity to our youth by adding 12 multi-purpose athletic fields interspersed in a natural green setting, baseball fields, basketball, tennis courts, and an inclusive and accessible playground, as well as picnic lawns and more. The new athletic fields and courts will make up about 42 acres or 12% of the park and will be supported by new amenities such as restrooms, concession stands, and storage facilities. The operational revenue that can be derived from multi-purpose fields will go to support ongoing maintenance, staffing, and upkeep for FDR Park in the long term. Why do we need 12 football fields instead of just 9? Initial concepts and feedback from constituents called for 19 multipurpose fields. Parks and Recreation and the Conservancy met with multiple stakeholders to come up with a compromise. The 12 athletic fields that have become a reasonable balance for FDR Park between activity, water, and nature, while still increasing much needed access to high quality fields. In addition, operational revenue that the fields may be able to derive from league play will support ongoing maintenance, staffing, and upkeep for FDR Park in the long term. And these next three questions sort of all go together. Will the fields be available for the public? How are you going to ensure access for local youth teams? And what does the permitting system look like for the new fields? And these are questions that all sort of feed into one another. So yes, the fields will be open for public use and have a clear permitting system. Parks and Recreation's policy is always to prioritize youth access to athletic fields and courts and to waive permit fees for youth sports teams. To ensure community access to the fields, Fairmount Park Conservancy and Parks and Recreation will continue to work with the Friends of FDR Park and other longtime stakeholders in the park, such as youth sports teams who have been playing there for many years, as well as elected officials who represent the park and its users to ensure that equitable community access is available for these fields. Why can't the fields be placed on the east side of the park instead of the west side? So this is actually a great question, and it deals a lot with the innate structure of the plan. Part of the reason for moving the playing fields and courts from the east side of the park to the west is to reclaim the beauty of the historic Olmsted designed park landscape and to move those very heavily used recreation facilities away from the constant flooding conditions around the lakes. The fields have to specifically be located on the west side of the park along Pattison Avenue for a very important ecological reason. The play complex is actually located on top of the site's stormwater management system, and the placement of that system makes a healthy wetland on the west side of the park possible. I mentioned earlier that a healthy wetland is more than just wet grass, and it has to function in a specific way. Water has to be present in specific quantities at specific times. It has to be slow moving and at a particular temperature. The example graphic on this slide shows how stormwater can be captured, retained under a pervious synthetic playing field, which is what is proposed for this site, and then released over time. At FDR, the retention facilities under the picnic and play phase are needed to capture the stormwater runoff from Pattison Avenue, which handles all of the stormwater runoff in South Philadelphia below Marconi Plaza. That water is then stored, cooled, sediments allowed to settle, before the water is more slowly released into the emergent wetlands created through the nature phase. So I just want to apologize. I know some of my answers are repetitive. It's just that these are common questions, and I feel like we ought to address all of them in turn. Turf fields have been linked to cancer and cost too much money to replace. Why not use grass fields? Grass fields require inputs of fertilizer, pesticides, and require tremendous mowing and irrigation maintenance to create a high quality field. It would also take 3 grass fields to have the same amount of playing time as 1 turf field, because grass must rest and can't be played upon when wet. This is why we see our local universities, private schools, and academies transitioning to what's called performance turf. It allows their athletes to have more playing time and the chance to be more competitive. Probably most of us have read the recent Inquirer article about the links between cancer and the turf used at the vet in the 1970s and 1980s. But there have been a lot of changes in the production of performance turf since that time. Today's performance turf uses natural materials for the infill, such as shells, sand, wood particles, coconut fiber, or cork instead of rubber. It can be specified to be created without forever chemicals, the PFAS and PFOAs that we've all been reading about so frequently lately. At the end of its life, today's performance turf can even be recycled. We believe that parents and coaches can make great decisions about their athletes. And the Fairmount Park Conservancy engaged in extensive community engagement, not only during the planning period, but also for our previous project in Hunting Park in 2023. Overwhelmingly, the sports community expressed a need for performance turf fields in order to maximize playability for youth athletes. Will FPC profit off of the World Cup? And were there other sites considered? The short answer, and the only answer, is no. In fact, there are no commitments from FIFA or PHL 2026, the local boosters of the World Cup, to FDR Park or to the Fairmount Park Conservancy. The only confirmed site for the World Cup bid is the link. 6 potential training sites were included in Philadelphia's bid, and none of those have been selected yet. Since the 2019 FDR Park plan included 12 multi-purpose fields, it was included as a potential training site in the 2020 bid. As a training site, 2 fields of the 5 in this first set would be used by a team for 6 to 8 weeks in the summer of 2026. Whether or not FDR Park is selected as a temporary training site will not impact the plan or the amenities promised, including the construction of these fields. However, it is our hope that in being selected, we'll gain funding momentum, working with Philadelphia Soccer 2026, and help propel more pieces of this project forward. The Great Lawn, Porch, and Market are the furthest out in terms of construction of all of the projects currently in development in FDR Park. But because they're so important, a great deal of thought and planning has already gone into these spaces, especially the Southeast Asian market. And unsurprisingly, that is the one question we received about this scope of the work. We believe the Southeast Asian market deserves a permanent home. What are you doing to ensure that? And of course, we believe that too wholeheartedly. The FDR Park plan ensures that there will be a physical space to accommodate the vendors' markets permanently. Community that the southwest corner of FDR Park was selected as the future forever home for the market. With the location determined, the planning and design can now move forward using a $100,000 grant awarded to the Cambodian Association of Greater Philadelphia by the Philadelphia Department of Commerce in 2022. There are going to be several exciting announcements of continued progress on the FDR Park plan in the coming months, and I hope you'll come out to enjoy the new park amenities, especially the new Anna C. Verna Playground, which will open this summer. It will have the largest swing set in North America and take advantage of the beautiful existing wooded setting of that part of the park. And I want to say again that we have taken to heart all of the opinions of the diverse constituencies of FDR Park. We have heard you, and we want to keep hearing from you. So please continue to engage through ongoing meetings in person, through the walk and talks that I host every month. They're not just for answering questions, they're also for listening. We've worked very hard to create a plan that is sustainable and creates a space for many types of park users. And we want it to be enjoyed by our children and our grandchildren. I think all of us recognize the amazing opportunity that this park presents to our community. We know you love this space, and we know that many of you don't want to see a change, but we're confident that this change is worth it. FDR Park is 350 acres. There is room for everyone here. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. I hope that you'll continue to be open and engaging. I look forward to talking with many of you on a continuing basis. And I think it's just worth noting that, we did have 400 folks come out. As I said, several hundred small scale conversations at that community conversation meeting. We want to make sure that we attempted to answer all of the questions that we received. I do want to note that I did provide a packet of forms as well as a self-addressed envelope to be brought outside to folks who gathered, and I don't know the fate of that envelope. It was not returned to me, but you can still submit questions at any time, and I would be more than happy to talk with you or answer the questions. Thank you so much. Have a great night.